I'm out at the field again, going to work on a project today, an experiment in sowing peaches en masse. I want to talk about that and what the ideas are and document this maybe wild, but I think foundationally reasonable experiment. Just ran into a wonderful windfall of excess peaches. Our dear friends at the Finger Lake Cider House, check them out. They're a wonderful organic farm and orchard and make beautiful hard cider and meals and things like that. They have a block of peaches, they picked them, and were going to sell the nicest fruit. They did that, and then they had utility peaches left over that were starting to get moldy. So I went through and organized the ones that were still ripe enough to be excellent for use in their hard ciders, and took the moldy ones, and there's probably a little shy of 1,000 some odd peaches here that can all be planted. It does not feel reasonable to put in the effort to get the pulp off of every single peach, but rather, what does it look like to actually open up the soil? So I'm going to use our electric BCS. So this charges off of a small solar array on our woodshed. I've talked about this, fleetingly here and there, but it charges off of our solar array. This does an amazing job of digging a trench, and so I'll use this to open up a nice wide slit in the middle of this bed right here. There's turnips on the south, there's weeds in the middle, and this could be garlic on the edges planted this fall. So I'm going to see what it looks like to cut a trench and pour peaches directly into that trench. We'll cover them with compost from our chicken yard and then some soil on top, and see what it looks like to plant peaches in the hole. I feel like at the very least it's a giant injection of rich, sugary organic matter to feed the soil life. I think it might be a nice way to plant about 1,000 or 2,000 peaches for the nursery in under an hour. We'll see. The thing I really appreciate about the BCS, well, first of all, the BCS being a two-wheel tractor, it's very, very nimble. You can sneak it in between 36-inch rows. But then this rotary plow, especially electrified, gas it was still worth using, but electrified we can dial in the speed of the rotation of that plow piece. And so we have it set on a relatively low rotational speed, but very, very high torque. And so it can go down deep. It's basically shoveling action. It's kicking the soil just enough to open it up. It gets under, I have it set deep enough with the wheel so that it can get under the root zone of the perennial grasses in here, making it a lot easier to extricate them. We'll just throw those in the walkway. And it can handle stones pretty gracefully. It'll take big stones and just lift them up and put them to the right. So I should be able to go down this whole line with one pass kicking to the north and then another follow-up pass kicking to the south, and get a good maybe 8-inch wide planting bed that I can dump the peaches right into. I'll do the first pass and take a look. I can't quite tell yet how much the bed would consume these peaches, so I'm not going to do the full 120-foot length of the bed, but rather start on the east end here. I'm going to leave a little dead end there because we've got stones. I want to dig that out by hand and make that a little bit more of a thoughtful featured end cap. But I'm going down about halfway through the bed, so halfway from east to west, and then we'll come back the other way and open up a double furrow here. This way, if we run out of peaches, that end can be a different type of tree seed. Maybe it's hazels or chestnut, maybe it's some perennial herbs, what have you. But we'll end up, we need more breaks and walkways through these longer beds. So I'm going to design it in by stopping here. This will be a 4-foot wide break, and then next year we'll do the same through all of this, so we've got a little bit of a midfield break. Boy, those cole crops are coming up so nice. Could do well with rain, but the deep mulch seems to be working well. Anyway, I'll do the last pass through here, back the other way, and then start assessing what it looks like to put the peaches in. Shout out here to my friend James Mead, who came up with this concept of converting an old BCS 730, which was a 10 horsepower Acme gas engine, over to lithium ion. It's 48 volt platform. He made these batteries himself. I'm going to link here to the website. He is developing these batteries in a more commercialized way. He doesn't do this part as a formal thing, but boy, it would be worth his while to think about it, because there's an electric motorcycle motor controller on top. There's an industrial forklift motor attached to this, and then these 3 batteries, and it's worked flawlessly for probably many hundreds of hours now. 2 passes, one in to the right, one to the left, gives me a nice deep trench. Question mark if it's a little too deep, although I think this field is now relatively well drained because of these permanent raised beds. There's a trench here in the walkway just in case it gets an excessive amount of water. There's places for things to drain. But I need to go through and pick out the weeds as we go. I'll throw those in the sun to dry out. But I think what I might do is pluck a couple of weeds in here and then start dumping in a crate or 2 of peaches and get a sense of what the scale of this looks like. That's the first little box dumped in, and I think this might accommodate most of these. It's a little overpacked, but I expect there to be sub 50% success, even if it's really successful. Somehow peaches feel sporadic and unknown to me as far as their germination. This is definitely more of a rugged way of dealing with them than cleaning the pulp off and storing them in moist sawdust just above freezing all winter and transplanting them out. But this will let me accommodate many hundreds, if not a few thousand, right down this line. So I'm going to use a hay fork and prep up a little bit more of the trench further down, dump some more, and then look at actually covering these with some compost and soil and see where that gets us. So that trench did about half of what's on the trailer. And then there's also more seed. Sasha pulled out all the ones that looked good to her before I even came down here this morning. So there's another this again. So I definitely going to work up this other section, cover that too. I think the next step though is to cover all of these with a really rich, healthy compost that has lots of eggs for red wigglers, and let them wake up and start their life and be able to eat the pulp off of this fruit and feed the soil food web immensely. Get that on and get it covered with the soil itself, and then cover crop over them with something like a turnip that'll grow very brightly and very clearly mark where the peaches are until late fall, so that we have a natural flagging system to know where the garlic can go. Otherwise we'd be planting blind around this later. Got about a half hour of labor on this end between running the rotary plow through, setting in the peaches, pulling some weeds here or there, covering with compost, covering with soil, packing it in. So that seems pretty reasonable. I think another half hour, roughly an hour in total, to do the other end and get some cover crop seed on top to mark where they are, and I could be done. So I'm going to just keep going with that. Feels like, you know, if 10% of this worked out, it will have paid for my time in a really thorough way next fall, when we are able to sell these plants or plant them out even as biomass plants. If we get 1,000+ peaches, we can start trials of windbreak and biomass and fodder in the form of peach material. The compost definitely helps define where the bed is, and I'm going to seed on top with some old mustard seed. This is from 2020. Time to use it up. Done with the BCS, so that can be back on the trailer. And with this little electric car and trailer combo, you can just hike down the field. It doesn't feel too bad to just move another 50 feet and center all the weight on the next line. So this is the western one. It's a little longer than the eastern one, maybe a third longer, and should easily accommodate all the remaining peaches that are on the back. I might not have enough compost to cover them generously, but we'll just try. I'll just put them in and see what happens. Something about the feel of this right now, looking at this amount of peaches, I can't quite tell if this is a really, really smart idea or one of the weirdest or dumbest ideas I've ever had. I'm looking forward to following up. For sure, I promise, one way or the other, I'll share how this works for next year. Fingers crossed. We've got beautiful elephant garlic coming up in March, April with a gap in the middle, and then peaches coming up in between them. And then the elephant garlic comes out in July, and there'll be 3 to 5 foot tall peaches as dense as this all the way down 120 feet. If there's nothing there, well, we'll have transplants for things like cabbages that we can put in some really rich soil that the failure of this project left. So can't really lose an hour or two of effort, and definitely a lot of wonderful injected sugars and minerals into the soil. A little bit of mold, but that's all right. The earth will take care of that. Anyway, got to finish the last of that line. I have just the right amount with a pile for the wasps too. Done for now. That's a total of an hour and a half, and that includes time filming. So I would say between the actual physical labor to do this experiment was about an hour here and about 40 minutes at Finger Lake Cider House sorting peaches. And again, if it fails, it feeds the soil. It didn't fail by me having to buy brand new equipment or materials or things like that. It didn't have to fail with any chemicals. It just would fail with fertility. So I think there's permaculture lends failure opportunity with a lot of this kind of stuff, but we'll see. So both sides have been sown to leftover mustard seed to pop it and get a really nice clean visual sense of where the peaches may be coming up. I think overall they're a little too shallow right now, but in the later fall when we run the BCS through, we'll harvest the turnips and run the BCS through to tidy up and create a 2-row for garlic, a 2-row for garlic on the other side, and take the loose soil then to cap the peaches and bury the mustards at that point. So that's the idea. Maybe 2,000 or so peach potentials for next year, or an hour spent adding a lot of sugar about 4 inches down in the middle of a garden bed to feed some garlic. Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching.